I'm not sure I can speak about why human beings in general go to war. I think that's a pretty large category. I can only speak about why 18-year-olds from Minneapolis go to war. They go to war because it's impossible not to. Because a current is established in the society so swift, flowing toward war, that every young man who steps into it is carried downstream.
I think we were really reluctant to get into this subject. You know, we'd made a film on the Civil War. It was successful, didn't want to be typecast, didn't want to be playing to the success of that. But, you know, people would just call us up all the time and say, you know, you got to tell my father's story. He's just now beginning to talk. Or, you know, my father passed away and he never told us what he did. And we found these letters between him and my mom. Or somebody will come and say, you know, I landed at Omaha Beach, you know, how come you haven't done something? And that began to erode our conviction not to go to war again. And of course, that's a part of it too, not experiencing that really just visceral sense. I mean, we don't know any other way than to ask the question, what was it like? And if you ask what was it like, you invite so much sadness and loss and terror in some cases.
The real war involves getting down there and killing people and being killed yourself or just barely escaping it. And it gives you attitudes about life and death that are unobtainable anywhere else.
We wanted to do something experiential that would help our audience understand what it was like to live through the war and to fight in the war. And we realized that if we didn't do it now, we wouldn't have the chance to do it later, because so many veterans were passing from the scene.
And then I heard that 1,000 veterans of the Second World War were dying a day in America, and that our kids, many of them the grandchildren of those brave soldiers, think we fought with the Germans against the Russians in the Second World War. And I just thought, oh my God, how could the greatest cataclysm in history, as we call it in the film, how could that get lost? And if we lose that, what do we lose? And we felt almost honor-bound to go in and try to figure out a new way to tell the Second World War, this time from the bottom up, not distracted by the generals and presidents and celebrities of the war, not distracted by armaments and strategies, but by focusing on what so-called ordinary people experienced, and to tell the story from their point of view and to honor, bear witness to what they went through.
We tried really hard to find a way to connect what was happening at home to what was happening to the soldiers overseas. There's this gulf between the life people had at home and what the soldiers were experiencing on the front lines. It's sort of an unbridgeable chasm, except that there's the thread that connects, which is the human beings and their families or their loved ones back home. And if you can really care about someone who's overseas because his sister is worrying about where is he and is he okay, you can sort of understand how this was a family story, and by extension, the whole country was involved in it in that way.
She'd wait every single morning on the porch for the mailman to come to bring her a letter. And finally, she would get a letter. She'd be so happy. She'd run upstairs and she'd let us read the letter because my mother couldn't read English.
Mom, how you getting along? Fine, I hope, and keeping happy always. I know I haven't written to you for a long time, and I hope you understand the Army has been keeping me pretty busy. I'm doing good and always happy because I know you're okay. Love, babe.
This is the greatest thing that's happened in the world. I mean, the biggest thing. And how do you limit it? Where do you begin? What do you have to tell? How do you get access to it in a new way? And we focused after some time on the idea that we would do the war from the perspective of 4 geographically distributed American towns.
It was a little bit of a trial and error process to come up with what those towns would be. We started with the idea of picking someplace in the Northeast, partly out of convenience to us because we live in the Northeast, and really with the idea that you could pick any town and find great stories because the war did touch everybody.
We chose Waterbury, Connecticut, Brass City, that had contributed so much to the war effort, had made lipstick holders and cocktail shakers and alarm clocks before the war, continued to make those alarm clocks, but then it was said there wasn't a British or American soldier that wasn't wearing or shooting or riding on something that had been made in Waterbury, Connecticut.
It wasn't so easy to find veterans who could talk about their war experiences. We met hundreds of veterans, and really only a small percentage of them were able, for a variety of reasons, to share what they'd been through. And so we thought, well, maybe instead of just picking a town randomly and seeing what we could find there, we'd find some interesting veterans and see where they were from and see if their town might work and sort of come at it backwards.
We chose Mobile, Alabama. We'd read a phenomenal memoir of a guy named Eugene Sledge, who passed away just as we were beginning the film. But when we went to Mobile to seek out his family and tell them how much we liked it and thought Mobile might be a possibility, they introduced us to his best friend and his sister and then their community, and we went out farther afield. And Mobile became this wonderful place. More of the folks that we interview are from Mobile than any other place. Factory workers from poor towns, African Americans, old kind of Mobile aristocracy. In fact, one of our Greek choruses, Catherine Phillips, the sister of Sid Phillips, the best friend of Eugene Sledge, our memoirist, is in almost every episode of the film and really helps guide you along from what it means to be at the home front.
We had started losing boys in the neighborhood. The boy up here on the corner was a Navy pilot, and he was killed. The boy down the street was an Air Force pilot, and he was missing in action. They started disappearing all around us. And my mother spent her time going to visit the other mothers, consoling them. And it was a very, very fearful time. It really was.
We couldn't make a film about the Second World War and not include the Japanese-American experience, and particularly the experience of internment. Therefore, we had to pick something on the West Coast because only Japanese Americans on the West Coast were interned.
We wanted to talk about Japanese Americans, not only their internment, but the much less known story of the magnificent 442nd Regiment that was as brave as any regiment in the history of the United States Army, and their amazing adventures in a country, fighting for a country whose parents were locked up back home and under guard and machine guns in the United States. And then we needed a small town. That was the toughest of them all.
We wanted to pick something in the Midwest because that was one area of the country we hadn't touched at all. And again, we thought we could just pick any random small town, but it might be hard to find really memorable war stories from that town.
And we found a fighter pilot who lives outside of Washington, D.C., and his story was so amazing, and he was so amazing, such a strong character. His story so unbelievable that Hollywood couldn't make it up. We asked him where he's from. He said Laverne, Minnesota, and we tracked it down. It's in the left-hand corner, lower left-hand corner of Minnesota, not far from Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Laverne turned out to be unimaginably rich with the discovery of Al McIntosh, the editor of the Rock County paper, who covered the daily experience of how the war touched really every family in that town in his column.
It was the godsend of this production, getting in touch with Quentin Ananson, our fighter, and then, by extension, Laverne and its newspaper editor who died in the 70s, Al McIntosh, in which we've had to have Tom Hanks read and bring to life as no one else on earth could do.
August 1941. Miss Agate Ryland, who was in town visiting her brother, knows what it is to see vast sections of the city ripped to ruin by German bombs.
And she remembers the nights that London burned, how she could read a letter by the unbelievable glare of the far-off flames.
It was from those four places, and if you look at a map, they're really anchor. They sort of hold down the country. We began to realize that we could comprehend the whole. We could get a sense of what the Second World War was like. paradoxically from the bottom up, and following these stories and getting invested in these people, you could learn a lot more about the whole arc of the war as well. That was the great surprising gift of how we approached it.
We are going on our third early morning dawn shoot. And it's about 4:40 in the morning. And we're not exactly sure where we're gonna shoot today. We're gonna quickly run up to the Catholic cemetery and see if that's a nice view. And then if not, we'll probably go to another farm.
Good morning.
Good morning, Alan. Good morning, how are you? Do you see your coffee in there?
I smell it.
We have to get up really early because we'd like to be able to see the beautiful sky. And once the sun comes up, the sky no longer has so much color in it. So if you get up before the sun comes up, the sky is gorgeous. And then we can try to find something to put basically silhouetted against that gorgeous sky. So we have a chance of really doing two different kinds of shoots. If we get up before the sun comes up, we can do a silhouette of something against the gorgeous sky. And then when the sun crests and we have first light, we can get that golden light hitting different things we want to show. So we have to get up early.
Take a look at this.
Yeah, it's starting to get nice down the street.
Yeah, look at the kick on that window and then close to the window.
Oh, gorgeous. That's fantastic. We had a lot of fun getting to know these four towns and the people in them and trying to find ways to tell the stories of what the war had meant in these places. And we went about it in a variety of ways. We focused first on finding out what was the archival resources that were available to us: photographs, home movies, newspapers, letters, etc. And we went to historical societies and public libraries primarily for that. And we put articles in the newspapers asking for people to contact us if they had stories to share or materials to share. And we were just deluged, basically, with materials. Why don't you tell us what you brought for us today? Right. Phone calls, emails, all kinds of things. A lot of the process was actually just going through and weeding through all this material. Everything that was sent to us was read. Oh, that's a great picture. And was responded to, and it was a huge job. But we found treasures we never would have found any other way.
You know, we live in a digital world now. We used to be able on every film to tell you we shot 1,050 rolls of film and that represented this many hours. We don't have that anymore. Sometimes the photographs don't get photographed. They get digitized and then they're into our system and the movements are made on them. And I kind of regret, being a kind of hands-on person, the loss of a lot of that. But I think it's fair to say that we have hundreds of hours of interviews, hundreds and hundreds of hours of still photograph, and thousands of hours of footage that we went through to distill. You know, you visit hundreds and hundreds of archives. And it's not just the places where you think, because you're not always just getting the stuff of the war. You want to get the stuff when it's not war, what it was like back home. So I see this film as a kind of great merger of a vast public archive, which was from hundreds of places around the world, from Tokyo to Moscow to Berlin to London, everywhere, and hundreds of archives in the United States, including the National Archives and the Library of Congress, particularly the National Archives, which has so many of the treasures of what we've done, and merge that with a personal archive. We got the home movies of the guy in Sacramento who's describing going to the movies and then coming and playing war with wood guns in the driveway. We've got him in color. It's real. You know it's happened. You've got their high school graduation picture. You got the exterior of your house. There's almost no, I'm proud to say, recreation. In one point in the Battle of Guadalcanal, we just took our camera and went through a jungle. At another point, when the news of D-Day is reaching the United States, we turned on the lights in the middle of the night at Al McIntosh's house.
Okay, James, go. Okay, yeah, that's nice. Hold on. Perfect, perfect. Just sit tight.
That's really his house. We turn on the lights at that house, and you hear his comment about waking up in the middle of that night.
In New York. Ladies and gentlemen, all night long, bulletins have been pouring in from Berlin claiming that D-Day is here, claiming that the invasion of Western Europe has begun.
When we stumbled sleepily down the hall to answer the ringing telephone, we made a mental note that it was shortly before 3 a.m.
That's about it, and the rest of it is guaranteed authentic footage.
Early in the morning, we were awakened from our bunks, and we were told to get in our flight gear and meet in the briefing room. And we knew it was something serious. We could tell by just the atmosphere. And as we took our seats and they pulled the curtain back, they said, "Gentlemen, this is it. The invasion of France has begun."
We decided not to use historians or so-called experts in the film. We really wanted it to be the bottom-up story of regular people who any one of us could know and could be friends with or could have in our neighborhood or our backyard. We want someone to tell you, I was there and this is what happened to me. But that means that we had a lot to ask of those witnesses to give us not just their own experience, but a little bit broader meaning of, why we should care about it and what it means for all of us. And so finding the people to talk who could do that was a challenge.
No one had ever really asked me about my experiences. In my generation, it's just something we all talk about. We exchange stories about the wall.
We have been on the telephone with our station KGMB, which is in Honolulu, and they report to us that the anti-aircraft fire can be heard in a steady drone as the attacking planes come in. As Mr.
We comforted each other, and the girls all cried and wept because they had boyfriends or relatives that were already in the armed forces. And we realized immediately that this would be war.
The day Pearl Harbor got bombed was the 7th. But in the Philippines, over the international date line, was the 8th. Same day, and we were bombed a few hours later. I'd heard of Ken Burns before because I was a fan of a lot of his projects. Baseball and Civil War and jazz. They were special. And then when I actually became part of it, I felt really honored.
I think that we went to have a great experience, and all of a sudden we were having more of a great experience than we really had reckoned for. We were scared to death, of course. Parts of the film that struck me the most, I would think, were the accuracy of the bulge and the snow. And having been there, I remembered it as being terribly, terribly cold and terribly uncomfortable for a very long time, but it looked worse than I remembered.
The Lost Battalion was the name of it was a rescue mission, which was conducted by the 442, that's my brother-in-law's unit. I knew about the fact that they had rescued these men. I didn't realize how terrible it was, devastating for them. It was quite a revelation anyway, to know the story, the way it happened, and then to see it being told by the fellows who were there.
It was on one of my very early missions that I first knew I had killed men. And I remember the impact it had on me when I could see my bullets just tearing into them. And I was doing it knowing I had to do it, that it was my job. I do not look at history with the cavalier viewpoint. It has to be right, or to me it's totally wrong. When we saw the entire film, the 7 episodes, at the end of each episode, Jackie and I looked at each other and tried to talk and tried to discuss it. But it became so overpowering in a historical sense, in an emotional sense, that we almost had to take a break in there and sit it out for a few days. This film just did everything that you would hope for and dream about in a film that related to World War II and the massiveness of that enterprise.
This memory, which is not distant, has just been kept so secret in this such admirably reticent generation that we feel more than anything privileged to have been able to bear witness to their testimony, to have been ushered into some of those dark rooms and been able to construct a narrative based on not secrets, but truths that they saw when they were young. They suddenly realized that their memory was their greatest asset and our inheritance, and that somewhere along the line, those that could began to speak, and we were just ready to listen. That was the only...
Starting this project was definitely intimidating because it's such a big subject and you can go so many different directions.
On one of the largest sugar plantations on the Philippine island of Luzon.
Just a few frames. Those of us who've worked on these films sort of feel like, yikes, at the beginning. What have we done? But you sort of like getting up in the morning and putting on your pants one leg at a time. You just start.
Americans facing that way.
It was just a daily process of discovery that you could find things and be open to them and say, didn't know that, we can put that in. And so that's part of the fun of it, is that we get to discover things along the way and then use them.
Everything has been read. The organizational process of dealing with this material is a daunting task. The producers would narrow down the material so that when an editor sat down to edit a scene, he or she could really begin to get the elements to sew a scene together.
It's the night before the Japanese came, or 2 nights before the Japanese came into Manila, and they've been there for several days.
We can still do this. So we go back to the nighttime shot of Manila Bay. This is a huge distillation process. That's what it's about. Our job, in the end, is to actually figure out a way to make this. Now, 14 and a half hours may seem like that, but it used to be more than that. And we beg your indulgence for the amount of time it takes, but we think it's worthwhile.
What followed would be remembered as the Bataan Death March.
If we had known what was ahead of us at the beginning of the Bataan Death March, I would have taken death.
We wanted to honor the experience of the veterans who fought in the war, the men and women who really put their lives on the line. And the best way to do that, we came to understand, was to allow them to bear witness to their own stories in the most direct and unsentimental way.
At dawn, on August 7th, 1942, American land forces went on the offensive for the first time in the Second World War.
So we should just come to the second. Why not start it from the get-go?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
We cover 25 or so battles, pretty, I don't want to say comprehensively, but you get to know them and you feel you know them from the inside out, and that's what we wanted to do. And some battles are just atrocious. They're horrible, and it was so hard for us to do it emotionally. Then others were simply complicated. At the end of our first episode is the first major offensive action that the United States takes in the land battle, and that's in Guadalcanal.
No one had any idea how long, how bloody, and how consequential the battle for Guadalcanal would be.
It goes on for months. And that's a difficult kind of battle to cover because you want something to happen, and it happens spasmodically, and you think, oh, there it is, and we've won. Oh, we haven't won. It just keeps going on and on. And it took us a long time to sort of break the back of the issues in Guadalcanal, and I'm now really happy about how we did it. So that one is a kind of technical problem, and then there's the emotional stuff.
We understood that we might be expendable. It had become sort of the established thing, and we knew our country was not yet heavily armed. And yes, we did feel that we might be expendable. We really did.
I don't think we really understood how horrible the war was for people who fought in it. It's hard to really, I think, appreciate from 60 years later what it would have been like to see your best friend blown up or to kill someone at close range and have their blood splatter over you. It's kind of unimaginable, and yet we felt we wanted to try to imagine the unimaginable.
It's a long process, and I'm so grateful that public television gives us the chance to do that. It's not a product, it's not a commodity that has a beginning, middle, and end. This is something that we love, and we want to work and caress and cajole and rework and re-edit and rewrite and do all those things until we think for our own, subjective view that we've got it right and it's time to share it with everybody else.
All the footage that we were able to get from commercial archives and from the National Archives came to us without sound. It was sometimes extraordinary action footage, very vivid, exciting, and you could see guns going off, you could see things exploding, you could see fire, but you couldn't hear anything. But when we locked our picture and started to add sound, our sound editors got very excited.
The Battle of Lady Gulf.
Found out, for example, the sound of this particular kind of machine gun. What kind of sound does that make? Or what kind of sound does a German 88 artillery piece make when it's going off, or a tank?
Tell me what tracks the marching is on going out and what track the car pass is coming in.
And we were able to collect an amazing assortment of sound effects.
From 1939 to 19...
I like that better. This is the most sophisticated soundtrack we've ever completed, and it's taken us more than a year extra. We finished the film, and for a year after we had locked the picture, been working on the soundtrack. It is hugely important to us that the planes buzz you, that the debris from an explosion falls on your shoulders, and to just have just the tiniest fraction of a sense of what it might have been like for these kids to have gone through what they did. We had a veteran who came in, and he said, "I've waited all my life to have something show it the way it actually was."
1, 2, 1, 2, a 1, 2, beat.
We had a lot of fun with the music on this show. I think going in, we thought we'd probably have a lot of music of the time, and we didn't know what else. We were lucky enough to get Wynton Marsalis to compose several pieces. We showed him some clips of the film, and he really understood what we were trying to do and composed some spectacular music.
So maybe you wanted to be more...
Today is a recording session for the war film. We've done some cello and sort of standard piano things, and we've asked Wynton to compose some original music for us to tell the story of the 4 towns. She's wistful. She's describing a pace of life. First of all, starting off with John Gray, who lives in a segregated part of town. And what he's done is created a massive suite that takes those 4 towns and divides nearly every one in 2 and creates a set of music that's of the flavor of the town but has a unified theme.
It starts with 4 towns, so he wanted a central theme that was evocative of America. Something that was related to kind of the early roots of the country, but had like American vernacular sounds, but could be adaptable to kind of swing in the music of the period. and a theme that could be utilized in some form to in 4 different ways to highlight the aspects of the 4 different cities, the people who live there and their way of life.
Well, Waterbury, where we lived, there were a lot of Italian people. They had made a good business for themselves and were very well liked. We had a wonderful neighborhood. We had parties every single Sunday. Every Sunday was a picnic for us.
This process begins with me, who I'm completely inarticulate about music. I sort of know what I like. I don't have any language to express what I like, nor do I have any musical talent to be able to actually do it. So it becomes a kind of gesturing, as if you're trying to speak to somebody in a language that they don't understand. And Wynton, with this patience, sits in his living room on his piano and sort of says, well, what about this? And he'll play different themes, and I'll go, yes, or well, what about this way? And then all of a sudden, something emerges.
So real light, like this, the tempo.
And to me, these are some of the happiest days of making films. On a project like this that will last 4 or 5 or 6 years, the days where you come into this room and there's bits of wood and brass and catgut and other stuff, and these people walk in very much like ourselves, who suddenly are able to come in and do something, and that you leave at the end of the day with this new thing, music. I mean, it seems so obvious, but it makes us happy. And, you know, I just turned to Jeff Ward, our writer, and said, we don't deserve this. You know, it's just too much, you know, that the notion that you would get paid to spend a day like this is like Disneyland for me. The fascination for the Second World War will never end, and it's understandable. Even as that generation dies away and passes completely, this is still the biggest event in human history.
It's seemingly a very clear-cut black and white war. There's the good guys, and there's the bad guys, and the bad guys are so bad. And we won. So it's a triumphant story that we can all appreciate and celebrate. And then it's also this terrible cataclysm that killed so many millions of people. There's the twin fascination of the horror of it and also the triumphant narrative of it.
We shoot in film, and every 12 minutes we have to change the role, and inevitably you go into somebody's house and you're filming them where they live, and the wife or their son-in-law or the daughter's there, and quite often, in between the reels, somebody would say, honey, you never told me that, and they would have just described horrific, horrific action.
We sometimes open things up that their family members had not heard, and that was amazing to have someone afterwards say, you know, Dad never told us about what he told, or he never described it quite in that way, or we've heard that story a lot of times, but never quite the way he told it to you.
You have a sense that this unusually, admirably reticent generation didn't talk about it. And then towards the end of their life, they began to talk about it, intimations of their own mortality, a sense also of obligation to posterity, to their families, to us, I think, got people talking. We wanted to just bear witness and honor the testimony of these extraordinarily brave young men and women, and then just say, this is what happened, or what happened to them, and then let these experiences wash over you.
I hope that viewers who watch this film will gain an understanding of what war really is, as much as it's possible for anyone who hasn't been in war to know that. There's not any family in America that wasn't touched by the war in some way if they dig deep enough. Everybody did something for the war. Little kids, old people, young people, everybody was involved in some way. And so there was a sense of unity, of purpose, that people remember today and wonder, why don't we have that?
We were all touched by World War II. Whole families were touched by World War II. And that, in my opinion, is the reason we're still so fascinated by it.
World War II was a time unique in American history. There has never been a time when this country was as totally united as we were back during those critical 4 years.
We were animated with no political agenda. We had no sense of wanting to make the most comprehensive film. What we wanted to do was say, how did it happen? What was it like? And do the best job we can. So I can't imagine the Second World War not being something that we'll continually return to and learn new things about, see from a different perspective and light, and ask different questions as our own experiences change, and realize that it will always, always have so much to teach us.